Hi guys from inside the newsroom. Welcome to the stream here at Fox 5 Live at Fox 5 DC in Washington. We are honoring the Queen of Soul this morning, who passed away at her home in Detroit at the age of 76. She was surrounded by family and friends, and we're going to show you sort of a tribute package for you to kind of start off our stream today, and then we'll bounce around with different streams. We'll have people honoring her at her childhood home, which you just saw in Memphis, and also at her Hollywood star in Los Angeles. So take a look at this package while we start it up.
With those 7 letters, Aretha Franklin made her mark in music history and helped define her reign as the Queen of Soul for decades. Aretha Franklin was born on March 25, 1942 in Memphis, Tennessee, to a Baptist preacher father and a gospel singer mother. Franklin was one of 5 children, and following her parents' separation, she moved to Detroit, Michigan. Regarded as a child prodigy, Franklin toured with her father's traveling revival show. It was there she honed her musical skills. She was only 18 when she signed her first record deal with Columbia Records, releasing her first album, The Great Aretha Franklin. She hit the top 10 of the R&B charts, but needed a move to a new label in 1967 to cross over and break through to the pop charts. The release of the album I Never Loved a Man the Way I Loved You debuted one of her most popular songs ever, earning her respect worldwide.
Respect was on the charts, and it was very close to the top of the charts. And we kind of knew something was happening.
An anthem for women everywhere, the song catapulted her onto the big stage, winning 2 Grammys. With her fame rising, Franklin became only the second African-American woman to appear on the cover of Time magazine, and she was invited to sing at the funeral of Martin Luther King Jr.
And the wisdom
Her popularity continued to rise in the 70s, winning Grammy after Grammy, transcending platforms, and winning the admiration of fans and performers alike.
I heard Aretha's voice. It's just something that she has, and the way she makes people feel, was what I wanted to have.
A role in the 1980 blockbuster movie, The Blues Brothers, allowed her to shine on the big screen, introducing her to yet another audience.
You better think about what you're saying. You better think about the consequences of your actions.
And she topped the charts again with a #1 hit, a duet with George Michael, I Knew You Were Waiting for Me. In 1987, Franklin broke yet another barrier, becoming the first woman inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And she stood before the nation performing at President Clinton's 1993 inauguration and became the youngest recipient ever of the Kennedy Center Honors 1 year later. The accolades didn't stop there. In 2005, President George Bush honored her with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest award bestowed on a civilian.
Generations of Americans have stood in wonder at the style and voice of Aretha Franklin. One record executive put it this way: Aretha is still the best singer in the world, bar none.
In January 2009, Franklin performed My Country 'Tis of Thee at the inauguration of America's first black president, Barack Obama. A few years later, she hit the stage in Washington yet again in a surprise performance to honor Carole King singing A Natural Woman at the 38th Annual Kennedy Center Honors in 2015. 2 years later, Aretha Franklin called it quits, announcing she was retiring from touring. Over 5 decades, the legendary singer scored 17 top 10 hits. She won 18 Grammys, plus 2 additional honorary Grammy Awards. But more than just awards and honors, she gave fans everywhere the soundtrack to their lives and used her voice to spread a message of respect, something she said is a basic human right. In New York, Laura Ingle, Fox News.
Such a great tribute there to Aretha Franklin, and it's interesting to note too today in the music world, it's also 41 years since Elvis Presley has passed, so some milestones there in the music industry. But changing gears a little bit, guys, I'm going to come back. We'll kind of stay focused on Aretha Franklin today as we have more video coming in, live looks at her childhood home like we showed you, and some other things coming in from across the nation. But I want to switch gears and show you an exclusive interview that Fox 5 DC obtained yesterday. Our reporter Tom Fitzgerald sat down with the Archbishop of Washington, Cardinal Wuerl, to discuss the grand jury report that alleges he and the Archbishop, sort of the diocese in general, covered up and protected priests amidst a sex abuse scandal in Pennsylvania over the past 70 years. This was a big headline in the past couple of days, and like I mentioned, Tom Fitzgerald sat down with him yesterday for this exclusive interview. You'll only see it here. I'm going to play it out for you now. And he addresses this, saying he will not resign in wake of these allegations. Check it out.
You said the pain and suffering are something that we need to take responsibility for, and you were concerned about a lack of confidence in the church.
Yeah.
Are you concerned about a lack of confidence in you?
I hope not. I hope that is not going to be my primary concern. I think it's a part of what I'd be thinking about. But I have to tell you that when all of this came forward, once again, when we heard of the grand jury report and we looked back, I thought I was having the same feelings I had when I was first named a bishop and first encountered this whole question of abuse. There was a family, and two of the boys in the family had been abused by a priest. When I heard that, I was just angry. And I said to my priest secretary, we're going to go visit that family right now. Call and see if they'll receive me. And as often happens in families, the dad answered the phone, and when I identified myself and said, can I come and see your family? He said, I would love to have you come, but I better check with my wife. And she got on the phone and said, please come. But I had the time driving down there to calm down a bit, because I was just so angry.
And I want to talk about where you are right now. There are people who have heard about what is in this grand jury report, who watched that news conference yesterday, that are sickened by the things that are in there. And they want to know, should you resign? Should you be removed as the Archbishop of Washington?
In my efforts from the time that I reached Pittsburgh on through to today, I have tried to do my very best to deal with this whole question of allegations against a priest. Now remember, we're talking about a long spectrum of time. So how we dealt with things in the late 80s, early 90s is different than the way we would today.
At one point in one of your statements, you referenced an evolution when it comes to the understanding of child abuse.
Yeah.
What could possibly evolve about understanding child sexual abuse?
No, what evolved was, how do you deal with it? And how do you deal with an allegation? Remember now, when an allegation comes forward, that allegation oftentimes ends up being one word against another. And part of the evolution, I think, has been to recognize that then we said, all right, let's ask this priest to undergo an evaluation. And we used the best science that was available to us then to say, okay, what is the situation? And many times we would get back, this person doesn't demonstrate any of those tendencies. So then the question was, okay, what do we do to preserve both the well-being of the person who is making the allegation, and that always has to be our primary focus.
Why not call law enforcement and let them deal with it?
And we do that now, but that was part of coming to understand how to deal with this. Many times families would say, please do not make this public. And we would always say to families, you should take this to the police. We reached a certain point in this evolution when I would say, look, you've brought to me an allegation. You've just said to me, please keep this confidential. I have to say to you, I'm turning this over to the authorities.
Did you do enough personally to stop this kind of activity in your diocese?
I think I did everything that I possibly could. One of the things that we did was we put into place a review board so that there would be a way of looking at any of the allegations that would take it beyond just myself and my office looking at it. But another thing I think we did, we tried often to speak to our priests and particularly to our seminarians about the absolute need for them to live up to their promise of celibacy, and that how absolutely devastating it is for someone to break that and harm a child.
Cardinal, the report and the Pennsylvania Attorney General have a very different view of this. The report says priests were raping little boys and girls, and the men of God who were responsible for them did nothing and hid it all. Shapiro yesterday in his news conference says the church showed a complete disdain for the victims. Did the Catholic Church show disdain for the victims?
I don't think that's an exact. I think that's his take to say we did nothing at all. That's simply not verified with the facts. Think of, and he says this in the report, how many people I removed, how many priests I removed. So it's not really exact to say we just showed a disdain for the victims. I met with every victim. Anyone who would come forward, I met with. And I have to say, more than once, shared a tear with them as they or their parents told the story.
You are mentioned no less than 15 times in this grand jury report. In none of those mentions it is glowing, but yet in your own statement, you had said that you thought that while it would be critical of your actions, it would show that you had taken proper steps. There is nowhere in this 900-page report that indicates that you took proper steps.
Oh, I don't think that's altogether exact, because in the report itself, it makes mention of the number of priests I removed. The Attorney General's report itself mentions the good number of priests that I removed. Then he goes on to say, but not all of them. So I think it's not altogether exact to say that that was a one-sided report. It took cognizance of the things we put into place, of the efforts to determine if there was really an allegation that could be proved, whether there was a way to get at the very root of this. And it says very clearly the number of priests I removed from ministry. So I think when I read at least parts of it that I was able to see, and that summary and part of the press conference by the Attorney General, I thought he mentioned very, very often the number of people I removed, and that was a very positive thing.
You had told CBS News that moving priests was out of our process, but yet in 3 instances in the grand jury report, in regards to Ernest Payon, George Zivas, Richard Zula, there are questions about your activity. In Zula, he was given a $1,000 stipend after he was released from prison. How does this square with what you're saying here?
He was removed.
Yeah.
He was removed. You were commenting on that he received some sustenance payment, which we're obliged by canon law to do. So I think that only reinforced what I said, that I removed this priest. Zula was removed from ministry. The comment and the complaint of the report was that he continued to receive sustenance, which was obligatory on me by the law of the church. So I think that just verifies what I was saying. We worked very hard to get these people out of ministry, but we needed to know, we needed to have something more than just the allegation. And in his case, it was clear. It was clear.
This is one state. This is not even all the counties in the state of Pennsylvania. Does the Catholic Church, do the priests, do the bishops, do the cardinals, does the Pope understand how sickening this is to people?
I think we all do. I think we do. And I think we thought we had made great inroads in controlling that in 2002. If you remember, all the bishops met. We put into place that charter for the protection of children and young people. And from that time on, if you looked at the graph, now we're just talking about one diocese, Pittsburgh.
Right.
If you look at the graph, the chart they prepared, you see the enormous drop-off in any claims of abuse from that time on. Actually, it began before in Pittsburgh because we had put in some very stringent regulations and some very stringent policies. So in a way, part of my anger and part of the revulsion I felt was we thought we had this well under control. The report goes back before the charter. It goes all the way back 70 years. And when you look back and you see all of that, it sounds as if we didn't do anything. But when you look at the actual numbers from 2002 on, those numbers dropped dramatically.
I have to ask you, though, that in the past 24 hours, there does seem to be a concerted effort to push back and discredit parts of this grand jury report. There is a website that went live last night called The Wuerl Record, which says our understanding of child sexual abuse has increased. Kim Fiorentino, who's the Chancellor, General Counsel of this diocese, told the Catholic Standard that it was a flawed process that fails the survivors and has inaccuracies. How is that accepting of the grand jury's work here and moving towards fixing some of these problems?
Well, I think you have to distinguish the two, don't you? You have to distinguish the two. There's nothing that says we have to accept every single word in that grand jury's report, because it does have its own spin. It does have its own spin on things. I think even the court in Pennsylvania raised the question of giving some more time for some of the people who wanted to answer the questions. But I think you distinguish between, is every word in the grand jury report gospel truth, and what were we doing, what were the bishops doing to try to see that abuse didn't go forward? Remember, so much of that report is about things in the past. And we're talking about from 1988 involving me on through, and particularly after the charter. So I greatly respect, and in fact, one of the things that I found so really hard to digest was when the report began to indicate how many priests were involved, how many people were abused.
300, 1,000 victims.
Yes, that's 5% of the clergy. So that was enough to really make me very, very, not to say annoyed, angry, that was the percentage. But then we had to turn to what was being done, what is being done, and why are so many of those cases from the past. Now that doesn't in any way diminish the pain of a victim, and it certainly doesn't diminish my anger when I hear about it. But the fact is that report, in the case of Pittsburgh, highlighted the number of things that were done.
Let's talk about right now. Catholics in your diocese right now have already been through a tumultuous shock.
Yeah.
The news and the allegations against Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. Now this. What do you say to them, and what do you say to a parent about whether they have questions about you and about continuing in this church?
Yeah, the whole Cardinal McCarrick, that awful revelation. Now remember, that we're told was decades ago. So I'm not sure, I mean, that was decades ago. I'm not sure what, beyond what we've done, excuse me, I'm not sure beyond what we have done now, we can say. We have in place, and the Holy Father stepped in immediately. We applied what we have in place, and Cardinal McCarrick was removed. I think that's proof that we took very seriously any of the allegations and put into place some sort of a mechanism to deal with them. I think when you look at the charts, you look at the facts, you look at the numbers, and I would hope the Catholics of this archdiocese would realize with me that we are dealing with something that we are very much trying to be on top of today. I can't heal anything from the past. We can try. But where we need to be today is moving forward to see that these things don't happen. And I think that's one of the great consolations we have. It's not a substantial blowing away of all of this, but there is at least the consolation of knowing that the charter and the implementation of it does seem to be working.
But is there a structure to the priesthood which is contributing to this? Many Catholics, for many years, since Vatican II, have questioned the idea of celibate, non-married priest. That they feel it is an abnormal style of life and may be contributing to abnormal behavior in some priests. Would ordaining women, would ordaining married people bring a more sense of community to the priesthood and maybe root out some of this activity?
I'm not sure that's really the heart of the issue, celibacy and marriage. I'm not sure celibacy is the problem, and I don't think marriage is necessarily the solution. I think the real issue here is that level of maturity, that level of priestly formation that is healthy and wholesome. It's one of the things that in our seminary programs today we're very attuned to. You have to keep working with every young man to help him arrive at that internalizing of the blessing of celibacy. The Lord Jesus was celibate, and we model our life on him.
Cardinal, my last two questions are this. What assurances can you give Catholics here in the Archdiocese and Catholics across this country right now that this kind of behavior is not going on, that the Church is not hiding it, and the Church has changed its ways?
I wish I could say there was some pat answer to that, but I do think, looking statistically and even using that Pennsylvania report to say the Church is making progress. Up until we began this zero tolerance, and up until we had the charter, that's when you found so many of these cases, these terrible, horrific cases of someone abusing, a priest abusing a youngster. But then, from the time of the zero tolerance policy in Pittsburgh, from the time of the policy here in this archdiocese, which goes back even earlier than that, and certainly from the time of the charter, that stream of abuse has pretty well welled up, or dried up. It's pretty well dried up, that whole stream of it. However, we also have to be aware that we have to continually work at seeing that no abuse takes place, and that when it does, we're the first ones there. We're the first responders to any act of clerical abuse.
This is my last question. You have been one of the most respected people in this city for years. People are drawn to you. They call you Your Eminence. You are a cardinal. You are our Archbishop here in the city of Washington. You're also a human being, though. You're not charged with any crime in that grand jury report. No one has said you've committed a crime. But what could you have done better, and what do you have to say to people to regain that responsibility that you talked about at the start of Mass today?
Yeah. I think that whole idea of saying, here's what we're doing today, because there's no way to change what has happened other than to admit that there were awful things that happened. And obviously, if they happened, there wasn't the mechanism in place to see that they didn't happen. But the one thing I can say to every single person in this community, Catholic or someone who isn't a member of our family, the church has such good policy in place, and we implement it very, very thoroughly. And the commitment is there because we feel that pain of seeing the face of someone who has been abused. So I think right now, I would say to every member of this community, to every member of the church, yes, there were failures. Yes, there were things that didn't work the way they should have. And yes, as I said at Mass, there is the need for contrition, and there's also the need to recognize that not all of the clergy were doing what they should have done. But that said, we can also say, in this archdiocese, we have extraordinary policy in place. And we work with our seminarians and our priests to see that it's implemented and lived. And if there is, thank God right now we do not have before us an allegation, but if there is, we address it as quickly and as seriously as we can. The one thing that has emerged, and I began this conversation with that, the one thing that has emerged, I think, in the hearts of all of us, certainly I'm speaking for myself now, is the sense of anger, the sense of betrayal, the sense that we just have to be better at addressing this, and then realizing we are making steps forward. This isn't as if we had retreated into the past. We're making steps forward. Let's just keep working at it, and let's just keep making sure that if an allegation comes forward today, it's addressed in the light of today's needs.
Cardinal Donald Wuerl, we appreciate you sitting down and speaking with us today.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. And to every single person anywhere in this country who has suffered the pain and the indignity of abuse at the hands of the priest, all I can say is I feel a deep sense of sorrow with you and for you. And I certainly hope that people can understand that this sorrow is also a form of contrition on behalf of the church.
And that exclusive interview, that conversation with Tom Fitzgerald and Cardinal Wuerl is going to live on this particular YouTube stream. If you guys want to show it to anybody or look back at it, it will be here. It's also on our website, fox5dc.com. It's searchable there. And I do want to queue up. I want to show you because Tom, who you saw in that interview, actually came this morning on our morning show and discussed what he thought of that interview with some of our anchors, sort of more of his reaction to that interview itself. And we're going to show you that in just a few moments.
Washington's Archbishop Cardinal Donald Wuerl speaking exclusively with Fox 5 in the wake of that bombshell report on sexual assault against children at the hands of priests in Pennsylvania.
Cardinal Wuerl telling Fox 5 he will not resign. He led the Archdiocese of Pittsburgh for 12 of the 70 years the alleged abuses spanned. A Pennsylvania grand jury recently uncovered 1,000 sex assault victims and more than 300 predator priests in 6 dioceses, including Pittsburgh. In an interview you will only see here on Fox 5, our Tom Fitzgerald asked the Cardinal directly whether he thinks he did enough to stop the abuses.
Did you do enough personally to stop this kind of activity in your diocese?
I think I did everything that I possibly could. One of the things that we did was we put into place a review board so that there would be a way of looking at any of the allegations that would take it beyond just myself and my office looking at it.
In defending his actions, Cardinal Wuerl has written to his own priests and issued statements arguing that the way the church deals with child sex abuses today has evolved over the years. Fox 5's Tom Fitzgerald pressed on the Cardinal on exactly what he meant by that.
What could possibly evolve about understanding child sexual abuse?
No, what evolved was how do you deal with it, and how do you deal with an allegation? Remember now, when an allegation comes forward, that allegation oftentimes ends up being one word against another.
Did the Catholic Church show disdain for the victims?
I don't think that's an exact. I think that's his take to say we did nothing at all. That's simply not verified with the facts.
More and more of these layers continue to be peeled back. Tom Fitzgerald now joins us now to talk more about his exclusive interview with Cardinal Wuerl. What's your biggest takeaway yesterday, Tom?
Biggest takeaway that there does seem to be a defense fence that the Catholic Church has set up around itself in regards to this report. It is a devastating report. This is 900 pages. They identified in Pennsylvania 1,000 victims, and that is only literally the tip of the iceberg. They believe in Pennsylvania there could be thousands of victims. 301 predator priests were identified, but again, they think the real number is much more than that. This stands 70 years. Priests have died over the years. Abuse survivors have died. We really do not know the full scope of this problem, but what we do know at this point is just jaw-dropping and sickening.
Did you get the sense that Cardinal Wuerl understood the gravity of this? I mean, we talked about this yesterday, and Wisdom and I have talked about it this morning. I mean, and I said this yesterday as a Catholic, it's stunning to me, stunning that there seems to be such a disconnect between what's happening and the way they think they dealt with the problem or are dealing with the problem. I just don't understand.
I think they do understand the gravity of it. However, what I heard repeatedly was a reframing of how the public should look at this. And you heard it there in just that brief clip. This is something that happened a long time ago, they say. We dealt with it differently a long time ago, they say. That's not what you're hearing in the general public about this. And if the church's argument is, well, we dealt with it differently back then, well, the natural question becomes, why did you deal with it differently back then? Call a cop.
Right.
Call the police.
Was there anybody who, did he ever say that they, I know he was all, and I've listened to this numerous times, and you're excellent job, by the way. I listened to this numerous times, and I was very disappointed with what I heard because I thought it was, I'm going to call it silly.
Don't even say disappointed. Say, well, we were mad.
It was silly, and it was stupid because there's no way you can tell me that, oh, well, the way that you deal with it back then is different than that. No, you deal with a child molester back then, you call the police. You deal with a child molester now, you call the police. But it doesn't seem to be how they handle things across the board in the Catholic Church. And to me, that is just, I can't even comprehend a grown man, grown people thinking like this.
What I would like to urge people to do is, and we have been showing clips of this. We had 22 minutes with the Cardinal yesterday. We have placed the entire interview on our website at fox5dc.com, and I would encourage people to watch the complete sit down. But, you know, in this document, there was a line that jumped out at me. And you don't need to go deep into the 900 pages because it's right there on page 1. And what the grand jury report says is this, and this is a verbatim quote, that priests were raping little boys and little girls, and the men of God who were responsible for them not only did nothing, but hid it all.
Right.
And in just those few words, that sums up what was going on here and what went on here for decades. We obviously asked the question about his future as the Archbishop of Washington.
He was unwavering in his response, but also we spoke with a lawyer earlier who has dealt with the Boston case, a similar case with the victims of molestation at the hands of priests. And he said the one thing that stuck out to me was in this entire interview that you did, all those 22 minutes, no apology either.
He did not apologize. He did not say, I'm sorry. What I will tell you is, you know, we've gotten a lot of questions about our question about whether or not he should resign. People may not be aware he already has submitted a letter of resignation. He did that in November of 2015. The reason is all Catholic bishops at age 75 are required to submit their letter of resignation to Pope Francis. Pope Francis has had Donald Wuerl's resignation letter on his desk since November of 2015. It is up to Pope Francis, however, to decide whether or not to accept that. You know, we talk a lot in Washington about how the United States Senate is one of the most exclusive clubs in the world.
Not as exclusive as the
Not
Cardinals,
even close to Cardinals. You're right, Maureen.
No.
There are 5 Cardinals in the United States. Donald Wuerl is Pope Francis's man in Washington.
It's always tough when you have questions of religion because you have people who obviously are very deep in their belief. And there are many who say that the Catholic Church uses to their advantage in this situation to create this veil of secrecy from the folks who are members of the Catholic Church. But what does this say for the future of the church right now? Because this is a church that has been very proud about the fact that it is a mass. There are so many Catholics, they don't want to lose members. Do they at some point? Do those of so much faith start to lose it?
Well, if the Catholic hierarchy does not understand that this kind of activity is a mortal threat to the future of the Catholic Church, then it is not paying attention.
I will offer this caveat. And you're Catholic, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And, you know, I struggle with this because I said this before. And being a Catholic, this has been something we've known about for a very long time. And I don't make any excuses for this. In fact, I find it abhorrent. I think that I was so disappointed in Cardinal Wuerl, who I've held in high regard. What I will say is this, for me personally, it's not about the man who is leading the service. To me, it's about my faith directly with God. And I don't look at priests or fathers, whoever, as the person who I'm praying to. They're merely the conduit for some people, right? So to that, my faith is not shaken in that regard. But I will say this church needs to reform because you cannot make these excuses. And you have legions of victims. We're not just talking about rape and assault and that type of thing. You're talking about genocide and all sorts of things dating back centuries. And so this is a problem that goes much deeper. And to those writing me, please don't. This is troubling enough. I make no excuses for this church. Yes, I'm a proud Catholic, but in the sense that this is the faith in which I've chosen to speak to my higher being, not to some priest who may be doing something that a human is capable of doing.
So that's just one of the things. Had any kind of response to any of this? He's the leader. Has he said anything?
One of the things you'll find disturbing if you delve into this report is the ways in which religion is used by the abusers to commit these atrocities. I will be mindful of the hour we are at right now and not delve too directly with this, but there are instances of priests presenting gold crosses to young boys and as a gift. That was not a gift. That was intended, according to the grand jury report, to mark those boys for further abuse. There are other instances where victims are told that they are being engaged in this abuse as a way to bring them closer to God. The structure of the church and the religion, in many instances by these priests, was used to commit this abuse.
And still nothing from the Pope, right? He hadn't said a word about this, right? We hadn't heard anything.
Not to this direct issue, but
he did remove Cardinal McCarrick last month. It would stretch the bounds of imagination to believe that the Vatican and Pope Francis is not aware of what is going on in the United States.
They're aware of everything.
Donald Wuerl is possibly the most important cardinal in the United States. Incidentally, not just here in the United States. He serves on something called the Congregation of Bishops in Rome. This selects all of the bishops, all of the archdioceses. He is one of the most powerful Catholic archbishops, cardinals on the planet. So to think that Pope Francis is not aware of this would stretch the bounds of imagination.
Tom, they're telling us we have to wrap. I mean, it's troubling, it's disturbing. I know you want to weigh in. Please hashtag Good Day DC. I don't know how you did it. Excellent job. Please go watch the full interview. It's worth it. Whew, okay, we're going to try to move on from this. Straight ahead, a chilling admission.
All right, guys, and again, that exclusive interview, the full one that we played earlier, 22 minutes long, on our website, fox5dc.com, and now living on this YouTube stream. Definitely a very tough topic to cover. But I want to switch gears a little bit, go back to Aretha Franklin. Right now we have a scene, I believe, outside of her church in Detroit, Michigan, and we're going to try to bring that up to you and see who's speaking. Of course, lots of tributes coming in today from ministers and friends and family and other notables on her death at the age of 76 in Detroit. So let's see if we can pull up that scene in Detroit right now.
someone last time, my blood was one of her veins. We've known each other for years, since I was a teenager. I was able to touch the warmth of her hand and her forehead and kiss someone last time, my blood was one of her veins. We've known each other for nearly 60 years, since I was a teenager. I was able to touch the warmth of her hand and her forehead and kiss someone last time, my blood was one of her veins. We've known each other for nearly 60 years, since I was a teenager. I was able to touch the warmth of her hand and her forehead and kiss someone last time, my blood was one of her veins. We've known each other for nearly 60 years, since I was a teenager.
All right, it looks like they are replaying that soundbite of Reverend Jesse Jackson outside of Aretha Franklin's church in Detroit. So that's what they were kind of feeding through for us. I was thinking it was sort of more of a scene outside of that church, but obviously words from numerous people in the wake of her passing. So we're going to switch gears and take a look at some of the top stories from today, recapping some of the stuff that happened in the White House yesterday and some of the other stuff that's happening across the nation.
Before has a former CIA director been stripped of his security clearance. But then again, we've never seen former CIA directors accusing a sitting president of treason. This unusual move? Well, it may just be the beginning. Former CIA Director John Brennan worked in government for decades, and over much of that time, he sifted through top secret information for presidents. Not anymore.
Mr. Brennan's line and recent conduct, characterized by increasingly frenzied commentary, is wholly inconsistent with access to the nation's most closely held secrets.
It was no secret that John Brennan was no fan of President Trump, saying the move was part of a broader effort to suppress freedom of speech and punish critics. He also called the president's press conference with Vladimir Putin last month treasonous, and Russia was indeed a sore spot. In a Wall Street Journal interview this morning, President Trump says his decision was tied to Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation, adding, quote, "I call it the rigged witch hunt. It is a sham, and these people let it. So I think it's something that had to be done." And there could be more. The clearances of several current and former members of the intelligence community are also reportedly under review. Some Democrats call it nothing short of an enemies list.
These people were being singled out to have either their clearances revoked or in the process of being revoked. To me, smacks of Nixonian-type practices.
All of this sparking a larger debate about why former officials need to hold on to their clearances.
John Brennan's got every right to say what he wants to say, as long as he doesn't disclose classified information. He does not have a right to a security clearance. That has always been a courtesy, and more importantly, in Washington, it's a currency.
And while we wait to see if more clearances will be pulled, Brennan, for his part, says he won't stop speaking out, saying in a tweet he, quote, won't relent. In Washington, Griff Jenkins, Fox News.
After a hard breakup and a series of medical issues in a short period of time, 18-year-old Katie Stubblefield tried to take her own life by shooting herself in the face. 3 years later, she became the youngest person in the United States to receive a face transplant.
Her whole story made our team come together much faster, and I think we sort of ran toward her to take care of her.
Dr. Brian Gastman and his team of specialists at Cleveland Clinic transplanted her scalp, forehead, eyelids, and nose, as well as parts of her cheeks, jaw, muscles, and teeth. 3 years of procedures led up to the transplant at Cleveland Clinic. It was the first total face transplant for the hospital, which was the first hospital to perform any kind of face transplant in the United States.
The main goal was, in one large surgery, to give her back both form and function. That was the main goal. And then to give her the chance to psychologically rehabilitate, to feel like a whole person again.
Stubblefield's face transplant happened in May of 2017. Since then, she's had additional surgeries to move her eyes forward and help improve her speech.
This was an excellent result given the situation. I'm very happy with how she's doing.
Stubblefield faces several more surgeries and will remain on anti-rejection medications for the remainder of her life. She hopes to heal to the point where her nephew isn't afraid to look at her. In New York, Laura Engel, Fox News.
After nearly 2 weeks, we're in the final stretch of the trial. Now it's up to a jury to decide the fate of Paul Manafort.
I said Mr. Manafort was very happy with how things went today.
Lawyers for the former political operative say they're pleased with the way closing arguments wrapped up and are confident prosecutors came up short in trying to prove beyond a reasonable doubt Manafort is guilty of financial crimes.
His defense team got to address the jury, point out the shortcomings in the government's case, and explain as the government has not met their burden of proof.
Government lawyers called 27 people to testify, including Manafort's old right-hand man, Rick Gates. He testified exactly how he and Manafort evaded taxes and committed fraud to get bank loans. But the defense says Gates did it all without Manafort's knowledge.
They have attempted to paint as a liar, an embezzler, and also someone who had an extramarital affair and so can't be trusted.
Government lawyers urging the 12 jurors to use common sense, they said, and instead look at the evidence and attempts to hide millions of dollars in offshore accounts.
Financial crimes, because they're on paper, eventually bubble up. And so these sorts of cases, you can hide them for only so long, but the numbers are what the numbers are. And you can get away with it for a while, but you can't get away with it forever.
If Manafort is found guilty on all 18 charges, he could be sentenced to more than 300 years, meaning the rest of his life behind bars. In Alexandria, Virginia, Lauren Blanchard, Fox News.
You know this president. He prefers bilateral trade agreements to multilateral. He's made that very clear.
Today, U.S. and Mexican trade representatives kicked off their 4th week in a row of negotiations.
Guys, we'll take a quick pause on these top stories of today, and we'll play that out a little bit later. Jumping over, though, to Colorado. If you heard the story of the husband who shot his pregnant wife, this is now a live press conference, an update on that case. Check it out.
Finally, in the late hours of Wednesday evening, the husband, Chris Watts, was taken into custody and was transported to the Weld County Jail just after 11:30 p.m. last night. He is currently scheduled for a bond hearing later today. Now, we will take questions later today, or excuse me, later after the interview. However, I would like to turn it over to Chief Norris for a brief statement, please.
Thank you. I would just like to say our hearts and our prayers go out to the families of this tragedy. I also want to acknowledge the overwhelming support that I have personally received from our community. I truly, truly appreciate that. I also want to say thank you to the local, state, and federal agencies that the gentleman behind me that has helped us with this investigation. I will now turn it over to the DA, Michael York. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Michael Rourke. I'm the Weld County District Attorney. And I hope that you all understand this investigation is still ongoing. We are at the very preliminary stages of this investigation, and so as a result of that, we're going to be constrained in the types of questions that we can answer, and I hope that you all understand that at this point. I wanted to address the process and the procedure that's going to occur from this point forward. After the suspect was arrested last night, this case has been formally referred to my office for determination of the appropriate formal charges that will be filed against the suspect. As Sergeant Albert indicated, the suspect has a bond hearing this afternoon at 2:30 in Division 5 at the Weld County Courthouse. Following that, we will be given a deadline by which we need to file formal charges. That will be sometime Monday afternoon, and we will make a determination on charges between now and then. That determination will be based upon the information that we have at this point as a result of the cooperation by Frederick Police Department, by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, and by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I truly want to thank all of those partners for their efforts. I'm going to turn it over to the CBI Director for a few comments, and like I said, we will answer questions at the end, but please understand two things. Number one, the suspect at this point is presumed innocent until otherwise proven guilty in a court of law. And number two, I'm constrained ethically as to what I can say, what I can answer at this point in time. Director?
Thanks, Mr.
Hi, I'm John Camper, Director of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. We join with Chief Norris, the Frederick PD, and really the entire town of Frederick in expressing our sorrow for the loss of Shanann Watts, Bella, and Celeste. This is absolutely the worst possible outcome that any of us could imagine. And I think our hearts are broken for the town of Frederick as much as anybody's. As you probably know, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation is primarily a by-request agency, and the Frederick PD did reach out to us. We were honored to assist with both investigative services and forensic resources as well, and that's primarily been our role with that. We've had at least 15 to 20 investigators as well as forensic team members active on this case for the last several days. As horrible as this outcome is, our role now is to do everything that we can to determine exactly what occurred and assist in filing a thorough case with the 19th Judicial District. I too don't anticipate being able to answer much in the way of additional questions very thoroughly. Especially in the coming days. We'll probably refer you more to the DA's office in the upcoming days, but we'll do what we can in the meantime. And then I too want to note that the cooperation that occurred and the collaboration that occurred in this case was textbook. The Frederick PD has just been outstanding to work with and an extremely impressive job of investigating this case, along with the resources of the FBI and the collaboration with CBI has been outstanding. And I also might add that the collaboration and cooperation by Anadarko, which, as you know, is somewhat involved in this as well, has also been outstanding. They've been nothing but cooperative in helping us with this investigation as well. So with that, let me turn it over to Special Agent in Charge, Mr. Shivers.
Good morning, my name is Calvin Shivers. I'm the Special Agent in Charge for the FBI's Denver Division. And I also would like to express my condolences to the families and to the victims of the families for their loss. The FBI supported this investigation from day one, and as Director Camper just mentioned, this was a great example of the law enforcement community coming together. Unfortunately, it was not the outcome that we were looking for. But again, the support of all the state and local and federal partners is critical to making our community safe. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Calvin. Like I said yesterday, we will not jeopardize any part of this investigation. However, today we will take some questions, but no details will be released that will jeopardize anything. Okay. Sir.
Yeah, James Weston with Channel 7 here. Have you been able to recover the bodies?
Oh, please.
At this point, we have been able to recover a body that we're quite certain is Shanann Watts' body. We have strong reason to believe that we know where the bodies of the children are, and recovery efforts are in process on that.
And you mentioned Anadarko. Is it fair to say that these were recovered on Anadarko property?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Has he given you any indication, and we know, and I have reported that you guys have spoken with him, has he given you any indication as to why he might have allegedly committed these crimes?
And that part, Jace, we just can't get into any comments that may or may not have been made by an individual in an interview. That really would jeopardize the case. So, and I can't even give you an assessment of that. I apologize.
Do you believe that there could be anyone else involved in this, helping with the bodies, or any indication that there could be additional people involved?
We have an awful lot of people that we still need to talk to. As you can imagine, an investigation like this, it's complex. We talk to anyone and everyone that, no matter how loosely related to this they might be, and so we've got a lot of folks that we need to talk to. In terms of, I think it's safe to say that in terms of any danger to the community or anything like that, we're not concerned about that at all. And so I'll leave it at that.
Generally speaking, what would you say led the case to Mr. Watts? Was it statement by him or the discovery of the body?
It would be a totality of the circumstances, a full police investigation. Regarding any more details than that, I will not give out.
Do you know when they were killed, more or less?
That I do not have at my disposal.
And to elaborate a little bit on that, any sense if he killed them all at the same time? Did he kill the kids over the weekend and then get this right at the end? Can you just tell us a little bit more about that?
That would be one of the many details that we are not able to discuss at this time. As I said before, the case is still ongoing. Investigation is still continuing.
Is there a timeline between when Mr. Watts was arrested and when the body of Shanann was recovered? Can you give us some detail on the timeline?
I don't want to test anything that I'm not either certain about myself or that would jeopardize the case in the matter.
The victim's family on social media said that he confessed to the murders. Can you confirm that?
Again, that would be a detail that I would not be able to disclose at this time.
Can you talk personally about the toll this case has taken on the town of Frederick, on your officers, on the team?
Absolutely. That is a question I can't answer, and it's been earth-shattering. Our small department, 20-plus officers, we've been working around the clock on this, and it's something that we've been working with the community, with the command staff, with the town of Frederick themselves, obviously the media, you find people, and it's been nonstop. And I don't want to say that there's no end in sight, but it's certainly ongoing.
Can you talk about, I know that the family is located on the East Coast, mainly for Shanann, just kind of bringing them here and kind of how you guys are working with the family?
Out of respect to the family, I don't want to disclose anything about their personal lives. Thank you, though.
Mr. Wuerl, any idea on when information on this case will be unsealed?
The affidavit in support of warrantless arrest was sealed last night at our request by a district court judge. We did so that we could finish up a few of the investigative steps. My anticipation is that on or about Monday, when we make a filing decision, my hope will be that we can ask the court to unseal that information and make it a public record at that point in time.
And the last person that said that they saw Shanann was Chris. He talked to us. He said he was the last person that saw her at 5 a.m. Is there anybody else that you guys know of that has talked, or the last place and time that she was physically seen by somebody other than the suspect?
Again, I think it's safe to say that that's, all part of developing a timeline in a case like this, of many, many people to talk to. And so anything that you hear like that, are certainly things that we check into, but then we also try to verify and talk to others and really complete that timeline as best we can.
You heard she got back from a business trip. Have you guys worked at the airport at all to get tickets?
Yeah, so again, it'd be one of those details that I just don't want to disclose. Let's take about 2 more questions, guys. Okay.
Shannon's body was found at the property van at Arco, but is there any reason to believe that she was killed elsewhere, just dropped off there?
We can disclose that her body has been located. However, I can't say anything further than that.
You can't talk about the manner of death. That's something that does get released. Can you share that with us?
Manner of death would be undetermined at this time. We don't want to speculate anything or rule anything out. I think that's enough for today, guys, and I thank you all for coming. Again, I'd like to thank all the agencies in charge that helped us out, and a good day to you all. Thank you.
So Shanann Watts was 15 weeks pregnant when she was reported missing on Monday night, along with their 2 daughters. Some details still to be fleshed out, of course, as we know from this press conference, but Chris Watts, the husband, now charged with the murder of his pregnant wife and those 2 little girls.
Trade agreements to multilateral. He's made that very clear.
Today, U.S. and Mexican trade representatives kicked off their 4th week in a row of negotiations to update NAFTA. The president's in-house foreign trade advisor says an agreement may be imminent.
The team has been working overtime, late nights, going through what I would almost characterize as the final details.
After President Trump threatened to scrap NAFTA and pursue bilateral trade deals instead, Mexico and Canada pushed back, insisting on a three-way deal. So far in this round of negotiations, though, the U.S. and Mexico have been meeting one-on-one, with Mexico's Minister of Finance anticipating Canada's return to the negotiating table in the future.
It will depend upon the speed in which in the next few days or weeks we finish the U.S.-Mexico elements, more particularly to the bilateral relationship.
But a couple of sticking points remain. The U.S. is demanding that cars must be built with 85% of their parts made in Canada or Mexico in order to qualify for reduced tariffs. But Mexico wants to continue making cars with more parts from other countries. The U.S. also wants the final agreement to expire after 5 years, a move opposed by both Mexico and Canada. With the finish line now in sight, it's clear that NAFTA's fate hinges on Canada.
I think the hope is that the Mexican deal becomes a model for what Canada accepts with us as well. And so, it should be good news for a deal with Canada as well if the Mexican deal moves forward.
Until then, Canada's on standby.
Canada is ready to be at the table at any time, and I think we're very hopeful and optimistic about getting a deal soon.
Now the Trump administration's in a race against the clock. They hope to get a deal done before Mexico's President Peña Nieto leaves office December 1st. But the White House has to give Congress 90 days notice before any foreign trade deal can take effect, which means the president's only got until August 25th to get Mexico and Canada on board. In Washington, Jillian Turner, Fox News.
We are grateful for his service, and I don't think you can say anything but he is a hero.
The body of a firefighter who died battling the Mendocino complex fires returning home to Utah. 42-year-old Matthew Burchett died Monday after a tree fell on him while fighting the massive blaze.
Matt worked with us for over 20 years. We're devastated and heartbroken by this loss.
And while a community says goodbye in Utah, the largest fire in California history continues to grow. The Mendocino fire has now consumed nearly 315,000 acres.
This thing is massive, and just the number of people involved and the amazing logistics.
There is some good news. Hikers and nature lovers returning to Yosemite National Park after a rare 20-day closure. The landmark has reopened.
It's really exciting to be able to come into work today, to be here in the valley, to take a walk in the valley, and to see not only a sense of normalcy, but to see the energy in the air.
And the impact of the wildfires felt well beyond California. The smoke from the fire is so thick in the Pacific Northwest that public officials are issuing health warnings.
The particles smaller than 2.5 microns, much smaller than the width of a human hair. And those particles are especially unhelpful because they go deep into your lungs.
Satellites have also picked up smoke as far away as New York City. The unhealthy level of the air quality index means that everyone who comes in contact could experience health effects from the smoke. In New York, Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
Mr. Brennan's line and recent conduct, characterized by increasingly frenzied commentary, is wholly inconsistent with access to the nation's most closely held secrets.
By revoking former CIA Director John Brennan's security clearance, the Trump administration today reignited a fierce debate over just how much access former intelligence officials should have to sensitive government information when they leave their posts, and sparked new questions about whether this amounted to a Trump's enemy list.
I do believe that Mr. Trump decided to take this action, as he's done with others, to try to intimidate and suppress any criticism of him or his administration. And revoking my security clearances is his way of trying to get back at me.
These people were being singled out to have either their clearances revoked or in the process of being revoked. To me, smacks of Nixonian-type practices.
The names of those under review reads like a veritable who's who from the intelligence community. James Comey, Susan Rice, Michael Hayden, Sally Yates, and a host of former and current FBI officials, all of whom have been ensnared in what some in the administration believe was a coordinated campaign to target then-candidate Donald Trump.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly.
James Clapper, who some have accused of misleading congressional lawmakers about the NSA's warrantless surveillance program, is among those whose clearance is under review.
Unprecedented. I don't know of a case where this has ever been done in the past. I mean, access to clearances normally would be done completely by a sponsoring agency.
On Twitter late this afternoon, Mr. Brennan said this was part of the president's broader effort to suppress freedom of speech and to punish his critics. Meanwhile, White House officials say the security clearances of those listed today and others will continue to be reviewed. At the White House, I'm Kevin Cork, Fox News. And one. Is this simply an
Each day, 360,000 people ride the Los Angeles subway, and now one of the nation's largest mass transit systems just got a lot safer. The subway has become the first in the nation to install body scanners designed to stop a potential terror attack.
All right, guys, looks like our sound is a little bit off on that one last package, but perfect timing because I want to switch it over to an inside look at the president and his cabinet meeting just a few moments ago. This is tape playback that just happened inside the White House. Take a look.
Well, I want to begin today by expressing my condolences to the family of a person I knew well. She worked for me on numerous occasions. She was terrific. Aretha Franklin, on her passing. She's brought joy to millions of lives, and her extraordinary legacy will thrive and inspire many generations to come. She was given a great gift from God, her voice, and she used it well. People loved Aretha. She's a special woman, so I just want to pass on my warmest, best wishes and sympathies to her family. We meet at a time of great opportunity for our nation. Our economy is doing better than it ever has before. It was going in the wrong direction when we came on board, and now it's doing better than ever before. We've created nearly 4 million new jobs since the election, which is an unthinkable number. Nobody would have said that was possible. It's going to go up very substantially from there. The African American, Hispanic American, and Asian American unemployment rates have all reached their lowest levels in recorded history. And we're creating manufacturing jobs at the fastest pace in memory. Nobody has any numbers where it's anywhere close to what we're doing. And if you remember, during the campaign, everybody said that it was impossible to create manufacturing jobs. The past administration, I won't say who, but I think you know, made the statement that we're not going to have any manufacturing jobs. And we're doing them by the hundreds of thousands. Companies are moving back into the United States. That means jobs, it means production, it means taxes. And really things are great. Yesterday, Larry Kudlow, a man I've respected for many years, that voice, that beautiful voice, I've heard it so many years, talking about financial. And he came into my office and he made a statement that was something that was very beautiful. And I'd like to maybe ask him to say a little bit about what he told me last night. Larry?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Appreciate it. Hi, everybody. So, look, it's a fairly simple thought. Most good things are. But I'm looking at the media, watching various TV and other outlets talk about stuff that baffles me, that's outside my lane. Here's the key point I've made to the president yesterday. I make it to you today. I hope we all keep making it. By far, the single biggest event, be it political or otherwise, this year is an economic boom that most people thought would be impossible to generate. Not a rise, not a blip, a genuine economic boom. And everybody wrote us off, going back to the campaign. And as was put into place last year and now the follow-through this year. And the numbers are coming in. They just keep coming in, which is one of the reasons I tried to get hold of the president on this. I mean, we got 3.1% GDP in the first half of the year, 4.1 in the second quarter. The Atlanta Fed is predicting 4.3 in the third quarter. I think it's a very realistic estimate. Here's a point. Anybody who does political forecasting using the economy always focuses on a number, hang with me, real disposable income. Just think of it as after-tax pay, take-home pay, Ronald Reagan used to say, who I worked with. So that measure is growing at 3.1% last 12 months. When we came to office, it was less than 1% on a 12-month basis. It has jumped. So people say only a few are benefiting. Not true. This is a measure of the entire economy. Everyone's wages and salaries, adjusted for taxes and adjusted for inflation, is growing at 3%. It's a tremendous number. And there's no signs that it's abating. Confidence numbers, large businesses, small businesses, and consumer confidence numbers are at or near record highs, and from the latest surveys are continuing to rise. There's no let-up in the increase, and confidence is everything. Confidence is everything. Now, I can run down a litany. I'm not going to take up your time. I'm just saying the really wonderful part of the story for me, you know, I get off on this stuff. I understand that, but it's very important for the country, Americans, workforce. The new numbers coming in, retail sales, industrial production, low inflation, a rock-steady dollar, trillions of dollars of capital from all over the world is coming into the United States because our economy, our investors, our workforce are crushing it right now. We are crushing it. And people say this is not sustainable, it's a one-quarter blip, it's just nonsense. Absolutely not. Any business economist worth his or her salt will look at these trends and tell you we're going for a while. We have low inventories, we have rising business investment, productivity is showing the first lift in years. The last number was 1.3% for the year. We haven't seen that in a long time. Businesses are investing, capital goods is booming. It's just a complete turnaround. It's like if you give Americans some freedom to run, they will run. All right, and presidential policy, low tax rates, roll back regulations, open up energy, trade reforms to help the American workforce and the employers across the board. We're not punishing success, we're rewarding success. We're not against businesses, we are for businesses. And we have a president who, in my words, just telling folks to take a rip at the ball, and they're doing it. And again, people may disagree with me, but I'm saying this, we are just in the early stages. We're in the early innings here. We never had a cap goods boom. We're now starting one. And we've never seen income numbers like this, again, after tax, after inflation. Policies matter. I mean, America's a free market economy. Ordinary people run our economy, entrepreneurs. That's the beauty of it. But policies matter. And when you change that switch, as President Trump has changed that switch, things are happening that a handful of us thought might happen, but I would not say it was widespread. So I'll just end, sir, and I appreciate the time very much. The single biggest story this year is an economic boom that is durable and lasting and that most people thought was impossible, and they were wrong. And you were right, sir.
Thank you, Larry, very much. Larry, I should end on that. This is always a mistake to do. Could I ask you one question? China.
Yes.
As you know, China was, for many years, as long as anybody up here, including the media, could remember, China was on a one-way road to becoming the biggest economy and all of that, and we were just going to be left behind. I'd like you to say, how are we doing versus China? And how is China doing? We want them to do well, frankly, and President Xi is a friend of mine. I want them to do well, but how are we doing versus China? How is China doing?
You know, so the latest batch of numbers from China, spanning, I mean, a good 6 months now, 9 months, their economy is just heading south. Retail sales, business investment is collapsing in China, according to the numbers. Industrial production has fallen and now is plateauing at a low level. People are selling the currency. There may be some manipulation, but mostly I think investors are moving out of China because they don't like the economy, and they're coming to the USA because they like our economy. I'm not a China expert, although I'm boning up as fast as I can. I would just say right now their economy looks terrible.
Okay. Thank you very much, Larry.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to ask Ryan Zinke, Secretary, who actually I watched this morning. He was giving a rundown on the horrible fires that are taking place, mostly in California. And I thought what he said was so true and actually rather incredible. People don't hear it. They don't hear it like it is. There are things you can do about those fires before they start, and you wouldn't have nearly the damage and the problems. We're spending a fortune in California because of poor maintenance. And because, frankly, they're sending a lot of water out to the Pacific to protect the smelt. And by the way, it's not working. The smelt is not doing well, but we're sending millions and millions of gallons right out into the Pacific Ocean of beautiful, clean water coming up from the north or coming down from the north. And I thought Ryan was great this morning. So before we start on a couple of other things we'll be discussing today, including very importantly schools and education, I would ask you to give maybe a little recap of what you said this morning on television.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. And first, our firefighters, which are 30,000 of them, are doing spectacular things. We've had 6 deaths related, and we forget that firefighters, while they're in the front line, their homes and families are in jeopardy, and our hearts and prayers need to be with our frontline firefighters that are out there every day. It is a matter of gross mismanagement. There is no question. The fuel loads are up. The density of our forests is historical. We have dead and dying timber, and if you don't believe me, believe your own eyes, go out and take a look at our forests. Take a drive out there and look at the dead and dying timber. It's been a gross mismanagement for decades, but we're burning our forests, we're destroying our habitats, and we're destroying our communities and neighborhoods by these catastrophic fires of 200,000-300,000 acres. Thus far, there's 5.7 million acres of our public lands that have been destroyed at a cost of about $3 billion this fiscal year. Americans deserve to go out and recreate rather than evacuate. So we went out, Secretary Perdue and I went out to California. We are committed to reestablishing sound science, best practices for the greatest good for all of us. But sound active management, Mr. President, is the path that you have laid, and it's clear. This is unacceptable that year after year we're watching our forests burn, our habitat destroyed, and our communities devastated. And it is absolutely preventable, and public lands are for everybody to enjoy and not just held hostage by these special interest groups, Mr. President.
And Ryan was saying it's not a global warming thing, it's a management situation. And one of the elements that he talked about was the fact that we have fallen trees. And instead of removing those fallen trees, which get to be extremely combustible, instead of removing them, gently removing them, beautifully removing them, we leave them to burn and actually, in many cases, catch fire much easier than a healthy tree, a healthy growing tree. Could you just discuss that for a second?
Well, Mr. President, we import lumber in this country, and yet there are billions of board feet that are on the forest floor rotting. And whether you're a global warmist advocate or denier, it doesn't make a difference when you have rotting timber, when housing prices are going up, when a lot of Americans are right at that border of affording a house, and yet we are wasting billions of board feet for not being able to bring them to a local lumber mill. It is unconscionable that we would do that to our citizens. And so, Mr. President, we are actively engaged. We have signed secretary orders. Secretary Perdue and I went out to California. We are joined at the hip to make sure we actively manage our forests, remove the dead and dying timber, replant diversity of species, and on the salvage operations, 5.7 million acres. A lot of that can be salvaged if we get to it in the first year. And we're going to do it, Mr. President.
And just to add, just to conclude, especially when Canada is charging us a lot of money to bring their timber down into our country. So ridiculous. Here we have it. We're not even talking about cutting down trees, which in certain areas we can do. We're talking about lying on the floor, creating a tremendous hazard and a tremendous fire hazard and death trap. So I thought they were great points. Thank you very much, Ryan. Appreciate it. We're also working to reduce violent crime and to help our great law enforcement, including the very brave men and women of ICE who have been absolutely abused. They are tremendous people. They're brave, they're strong, they're tough, and they're good. They're good people. And you think you're going to send just regular people in to take care of MS-13 and these gangs? Not going to happen. So I just want to thank ICE and everybody in law enforcement for the incredible job they've done and are doing. Our families prepare, and they are in the process of preparing for the new school year. My administration is working closely with state and local authorities to protect our schools and to protect our children. Our hearts continue to grieve for the victims of the horrific shootings at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, that we all know too well about, what they went through. Incredible people. And Santa Fe High School in Texas, same thing. In March, I established the Federal Commission on School Safety to address the tragedy of violence in our classrooms. Since that time, the Commission has held nearly a dozen public meetings and listening sessions with educators, administrators, law enforcement, state and local leaders, survivors, and families general. We've signed two critical forms and reforms into law. One is Stop School Violence Act. It's a very important thing. People said we probably wouldn't be able to get it through. We got it through. Provides grants to schools to improve safety, and the Fix NICS Act, which strengthens background checks for firearm purchases. It very much strengthens. A lot of people didn't want to report on that because probably it was too good to report about. It's a very important thing. It strengthens the background checks for firearm purchases. Today, Education Secretary Betsy DeVos and others and various commission leaders will provide an update on their work. We're going to have a lot of people in this room involved, even people that aren't involved that much with education, but they're very smart people sitting around this wonderful desk or table. Secretary Azar, Nelson, and Sessions. A lot of other people are joining. A lot of people have asked me if they could join. Ben Carson's one. A lot of people have asked me if they could join. They consider the schools to be so important in education and now so important in safety. We want to harden our schools against attack, improving communications between law enforcement, school officials, mental health professionals, and counselors, training school personnel so they better protect our students, including allowing qualified personnel to be armed. As you know, in Florida, they went in with a bill that didn't have that, and they came out with a bill where the legislature wanted it. So that's up to the community, not up to the federal government. That's up to the community. Improving our early warning system to make sure schools, families, and law enforcement can identify red flags and respond quickly. We want a very rapid response. Some of the response has been incredible, and some of the response has not been good. Obviously, you saw that very, very well. And frankly, you reported it very well. We want to strengthen our mental health laws and procedures. So important. I think it's probably the most underrated element of what we're doing, but it might be the most important. Mental health, the laws and procedures. Keeping guns, we want to keep them out of the hands of those who pose a threat to themselves and to, more importantly, frankly, others. And we want to foster a culture that celebrates life and forms real and meaningful human connections so that we can see not only in terms of education, but we can see if something's going wrong with somebody, we can do something about it. in Florida, there were a lot of red flags. I guess they said there were 28 to 38 red flags where everybody knew this was a sick person, and nobody did anything about it. And that's what you end up with. So I look forward to today's discussion, and we will make our schools not only very safe, we think they're already safe, but we're going to have the finest school system anywhere. So I want to thank you all for being here. Betsy, maybe we could start with you, and we'll go over your little section, and then we'll hear from Secretary Azar, Attorney General Sessions, and a couple of others. If you'd like, you could stay, or if you'd like, you can also leave. Don't forget, freedom of the press.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, after the tragedy in Parkland, Florida, you took swift action. No parent should fear for their child's life when they go to school, and no student, no teacher should ever have to worry about their safety at school. You convened students, families, and educators to have an honest dialogue. You pressed Congress to pass Fix Nix and the Stop School Violence Acts. You called governors, state, and local leaders to action. You asked me to travel to Parkland to visit with students and teachers. And Mr. President, you traveled to Texas in May to meet with parents, families, and survivors of the shooting at the Santa Fe High School. We've suffered too many heartbreaking reminders that our nation must come together to address the underlying issues that foster a culture of violence. And you rightly insisted from day one that we wouldn't keep our children safe by looking only at any one particular piece of this much larger problem. When you asked me to chair the Federal Commission on School Safety, you directed us to explore a range of issues, including mental health treatment, social and emotional learning, the difference that armed school resource officers make on a daily basis, the impact of violent entertainment on the development of young children, the gaps or failures among local officials when they're aware of a troubled minor and fail to act, along with a number of other issues. So we set out to gain input from students, parents, teachers, school safety personnel, administrators, law enforcement officials, state and local leaders, mental health professionals, school counselors, anyone and everyone who's focused on identifying and elevating solutions. I invite my colleagues to look at the slides included in your books, which are a small insight into the Commission's information and gathering process. I've been very pleased to work with my fellow Commission members, Attorney General Sessions, Secretary Azar, and Secretary Nielsen to do exactly that, to learn from those closest to students. Our aim isn't to impose a one-size-fits-all solution for everyone, everywhere. The primary responsibility for the physical security of schools and the safety of their students naturally rests with states and local communities. And it's clear from all of our work thus far that many schools and communities take this responsibility very seriously. Many have employed solutions that uniquely meet their needs and requirements. It's also clear that keeping kids safe at school is not a one-time check-the-box exercise. A safety plan you implement once and call it good. It requires a posture of perpetual preparedness. And what's necessary and right for a school with 50 students in Cheyenne is very different than what's necessary and right for a school in Chicago. Let me briefly tell you about the meetings the Department of Education has specifically led. In May, I met with survivors and family members affected by past shootings, individuals from Columbine, Virginia Tech, Sandy Hook, and also from Parkland. In addition, we heard from authors of the reports written in the aftermath of those shootings. Later in May, we visited Hebron Harmon Elementary School in Maryland. Hebron Harmon's district uses a flexible framework of positive behavior interventions and support, modeling one way schools can help create a strong school climate. This approach brings to mind the First Lady's strong leadership on well-being and social-emotional learning through her Be Best initiative. Then here at the White House in June, we met to hear some practical strategies that schools could use to combat negative effects of violent entertainment, media, and cyberbullying. A key takeaway: culture and climate really matter in schools. I was struck and impressed by the obvious passion of Paul Gosman, a superintendent from Iowa. It takes strong leadership to create a positive culture, and that flows from empowered educators who know their students well. Each of my fellow commissioners have led other field and commission meetings during the course of our work, so now I'd like to ask Secretary Azar to talk about the work of HHS in the context of the commission.
Thank you, Betsy.
Well, Mr. President, thank you for the opportunity to be on the School Safety Commission, and I'd like to thank Secretary DeVos for tremendous and tireless leadership of the Commission and fellow commissioners, the Attorney General, and Secretary Nielsen. We at HHS have focused on the really critical role you pointed out of mental health. Mental health is so central to these issues of school violence and safety. That's been our area of focus. I think it's very important to remember, though, that we not stigmatize those with mental illness. Most crimes of violence are not committed by those with serious mental illness. Those with serious mental illness are actually more likely than others to be victims of crimes of violence. And those who are receiving treatment for serious mental illness are no greater threat than any other individual for committing a crime of violence. That's just important that we remember as we talk about these important issues. There are really three key mental health issues that we've identified through our work on the Commission: access, privacy, and civil commitment. Access. How do we expand access to mental health services overall for children and others? Second, how do we integrate that mental health service into our schools, delivering that service where the kids feel most comfortable and where they can get it best and where the stigma can be the least? How do we look at the appropriate use of different psychotropic medicines, appropriate and inappropriate use, study that carefully? Our privacy rules in the federal government, where do our privacy rules get in the way of kids getting care? Where do they get in the way of teachers and administrators reporting children who need help? Where do they get in the way of family members getting the care that their other family members need? And then finally, understanding how civil commitment may help address serious mental illness. We studied these issues in our meetings that we hosted here in Washington, as well as an excellent field visit that we took to a middle school in Wisconsin. On access, we learned how integrating services into schools is ideal. It can really decrease stigma and meet the kids where they are. We learned that 1 in 5 youth suffer from some form of mental disorder, but half of them are not getting treatment for it. We learned that school-based care leads to improved grades, better attendance, health and mental health care and outcomes. We learned that medications are overutilized and underutilized, depending on the circumstance. And we learned that we need much more research on these medications and their use in a youth population. On privacy, we learned how misunderstood the rules are and how often over-counseled and over-interpreted those rules are. We learned the barriers to families getting care for their kids and family members, treatment that they need. And we also saw very importantly how this issue comes up in the issue of opioids and substance use disorder, how it's preventing family members from getting their other family members' treatment. So we're looking at any needed changes that we can take, and that'll be in the report, better training as well as changes to our rules to help schools, families, and healthcare providers. We got to see great work in local communities. This middle school we went to in Adams County in Wisconsin was just tremendous. Integrated mental health services in the schools. They trained their teachers to recognize mental health issues, and they just built a supportive, happy environment that any one of us would be delighted to send our children into in an area that frankly suffers from tremendous poverty, and yet they still were able to deliver that. This was done through funding by HHS, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Agency, in close partnership with the governor in the state of Wisconsin. It shows that it can be done. This can be solved. 75% of serious mental illness starts by the age of 25, so we've got to get these kids in middle school, in senior high, and in college. We look forward to highlighting areas that we can improve our delivery through the work of the Commission and our report, and we're just grateful to the President for his leadership to help our children have a safe, healthy, happy school environment. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate it, but I do want you to bring up something that you and I have been working on very hard, and that's prescription drug prices. So as everybody knows, Pfizer last week raised substantially the price of their drugs, and I wasn't happy about it. Novartis also and others. And we made some phone calls, and they brought it back down to what the price was. And I think you're going to see a reduction in drug price. And that's the first time that's ever happened, I believe, ever. But I was not happy about it, and it wasn't right. And we're working on very much getting rid of the middleman. Could you talk about how we're reducing drug prices and how it's starting to really take effect? And maybe talk about the fact that we appreciate very much what Pfizer and Novartis and the others did. We really do. We really appreciate it.
Correct.
Please.
So just for the media and others, I have said that I have never once had a discussion with President Trump where we have not discussed drug pricing, and we continue batting 1,000 here today. He is adamant about bringing drug prices down, and it has come through the 100 days of work that we have gone through since the president released his blueprint on reducing drug prices and putting American patients first. As the president said, there have been some really significant moves because the drug companies and others in the system see the writing on the wall. The system is going to change, prices will come down, and they're skating to where the puck is going to be. We've had 15 companies make significant announcements around drug pricing. Pfizer reversed its price increases. Merck announced that it's going to be decreasing prices. We've had several other companies who had told state regulators that they were going to increase prices, and they have now walked back and said they will not follow through on those increases. And we've seen over a dozen companies say that they will have no further price increases for the rest of the year. We'll be coming out with a report on the 100 days progress that we've made so far next week, and that will have even more information for you about the historic changes we're already experiencing in the drug pricing market. We've done some transformative things under the president's leadership already. For the first time in history, the president is introducing a regime to import drugs from other developed countries that do not violate intellectual property rights in the United States here. So these are products that are not under patent protection, but where the company, a single company, holds that drug in the U.S. and is increased price. We're going to let competition come in to ensure patient access and competition here in the United States. For the first time in history, the president has done that. In addition, for the first time in history, President Trump is bringing negotiation and discounts to our Medicare Part B drug program. That is the drug program where doctors administer the drugs. For all of its history, we simply pay sticker price for drugs. No discounting, no rebates, no control. For the first time ever, we are unleashing our Medicare Advantage plans to negotiate discounting on $12 billion of drugs. And every penny we save is going to be money that the patients save, because we're mandating that over 50% of all savings be passed back to the patient from the work of these insurance companies negotiating against the drug companies. So everybody's seeing the change is coming. We've had historic rates this last month, the highest level of generic drug approval by Commissioner Gottlieb ever in history. We're increasing competition. We're increasing the approval of new branded drugs, bringing new therapies to market. So it's not going to change overnight. This is a $400 billion segment of the economy. We are not driving for any kind of cheap gimmicks or quick solutions. We're doing things the right way. We are structurally rebuilding this entire segment of the economy to lead to enduring lower prices that are sustainable and support innovation.
Thank you very much. And as you know, the pharmaceutical industry is said for many years to have the most powerful lobby. The good news is I don't need their money, so we're doing the right thing. And frankly, I think the drug companies actually, in the long run, I really believe this, Secretary, I think they're going to benefit also. But the middleman is not going to be benefiting. Somebody and some very rich people out there that do nothing, make a lot of money, very rich people. I don't know who they are. I don't want to know who they are, but they don't like me too much right now, I would say. Wouldn't you say? So congratulations. Thank you very much. This is in terms of prescription drugs and drugs. Nothing like this has ever happened before in our country. And I will say that the Democrats heard about it. They're very happy about it, or so they tell me. I'm sure they won't tell you, but they can't believe what's happening. So because they want to see that too. They want to see drug prices come down. And nobody's ever seen where they raised the prices 10% and the following day they announced that they were just kidding. But that's what happened. So thank you very much, Secretary. Fantastic job. You're doing a fantastic job. Jeff?
Well, thank you. On drugs, you directed us to reduce opioid by 30%. We believe that is achievable. We believe there's at least that much abuse in the opioid prescriptions, and DEA just announced today reducing the number that's lawfully can be produced, and we've indicted 170 physicians who have been prescribing unlawfully people who are addicted to drugs. Betsy DeVos has done a great job leading our commission. I've attended all five of the meetings. We've learned a great deal. She is going to lead us to have a report before our deadline in advance of it, and I think it will definitely help make schools safer. I would also say that In addition to those meetings, I met with some 18 law officers, many of whom, some were at Columbine, Aurora, and Parkland, who were there when it happened. They believe that we need to do a better job of sharing information to identify the red flags that you mentioned earlier. The juvenile courts are totally secret. Police have secrecy rules. Schools have secrecy rules. Mental health people have secrecy rules. Medical professions have secrecy rules. And we think we can do a better job.
I want to take a quick break there from the cabinet room with President Trump and his cabinet. This was playback from earlier today, and go over to another live event that's happening right now in New Haven, Connecticut. They've been dealing with some really just an epidemic of severe overdosing, K3 among the drugs, and right now officials and police, members of law enforcement are talking about this overdose problem in Connecticut.
Both on a local as well as federal level, and seeing if, God forbid, if some of these patients had died or do die, could we charge the person with possibly an act of terrorism?
You know what the issue is laced with?
I've heard many things, but I'm counting on what the DEA has said to us. The samples that we sent to them, they told us was just synthetic K2, but we have sent them additional samples and are awaiting the results of those tests.
So are you confident that you know where all this product went in New Haven? And do you have a sense of where it came from? And just the other question I have for the hospital, could you give us numbers of how many people are still hospitalized and conditions?
I am confident that we have a good idea of where the product came from. Our intelligence unit, based on information they received from the victims as well as interrogation with the two subjects, indicates where the product has come from. We are searching and executing search warrants at additional locations to make sure that any additional product that may be out there that we can get into our custody. And we do know that a lot of the product that was distributed, we don't definitely have it all back, which is why I believe we're seeing some cases today.
Was it handed out? Was it handed out to fill demand sheet?
That is our belief. What many of the subjects were telling us is that they were not being charged for the product. Some were being charged by one subject. Another subject was not charging, simply was handing it out.
Chief, be sure you're not sure if fentanyl was
I have heard reports by doctors from Yale New Haven Hospital that some of the testing that they were able to perform did have cases that had fentanyl. The case, the one that we gave to the DEA was tested by the DEA, and by 5 p.m. they released information to us that it was simply synthetic K2 that they had tested. We sent additional samples to them once we were hearing from Yale New Haven Hospital that the doctors had found some cases laced with fentanyl.
Chief, that was the second question about how many patients.
Could you just hold on for a minute and let other people ask questions before you ask your second one? Go
Chief,
ahead.
you said you have increased police presence on the green.
Yes.
Can you say what the pre-yesterday presence normally is on the green and how much you're adding?
Sure. Each district, the city is broken up into 10 districts. On a normal A squad or day shift, we will have anywhere from 6 to 8 officers patrolling downtown. Now the green in particular, because it's had such an increase in people on the green, we've had activities, concerts, etc. We've added an additional 4 bicycle officers downtown. So you'd have anywhere from 6 to 10 officers patrolling all of downtown. And on the green in particular, you probably have 2 to 3. It's a large area to cover, but that's now we have, since this incident occurred, we have an entire unit down there. We have detectives as well as patrol officers as well as multiple supervisors. So I'd say you'd have anywhere from 15 to 20 officers patrolling the green right now.
Chief, we're live on Fox 61. I just wanted to ask, these 2 individuals that you have already brought into custody,
yes,
are they individuals that you have known from past drug dealing?
Yes, they are individuals that we known from past drug dealing, particularly past drug dealing with this substance K2. They were arrested, one of the individuals, I won't say what month, but they were arrested previously for this and placed on parole for this, and clearly are continued in their activities. So they are familiar to us.
The State Senate today playing New Haven for what happened, saying that we created a condition on the green that let the guys flourish.
I would just like to say this. We are the only city in Connecticut that got a $9.4 million hit from the state budget. And so I am really appalled that someone who contributed to our city's lack of resources would say that it is our fault. The truth of the matter is that we are a city that is 18.7 square miles. 54% of our city is tax exempt, and we absolutely depend upon the state for the resources that we need. But in spite of the fact that they didn't give us the resources, we have been working on that green for the past 4 years to deal with some of the problems that are there. So I think that he just needs to get his facts straight.
And we're getting word that there's actually things going on in the green right now. Did you guys hearing that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely. Was every one of these cases that you saw limited to just the area of the green? Were there other areas the city that responded to, maybe the immediate surrounding area?
So it wasn't just limited to the green. The green is where the bulk of the cases took place, but we had other incidences in the Westville part of the city as well as the Fairhaven part of the city. And then later in the day, people further up Chapel Street, which would be the Dwight Kensington part of the city. So it wasn't just contained to the green.
Do you believe those are related to the same product, with the same symptoms?
I do believe it's interrelated, especially with the close correlation of time. The issue is that sometimes the population may not use the product immediately, may have used it later, or may have left the area of the green once there was such a large influx of police and public safety officials.
Chief, going forward, is there anything that issues with overdoses before? Is there anything, is it education, is it outreach, is it war patrol? How do you sort of try to handle this, especially with the green area, the downtown, the vibrant part of the city?
I think it's a combination of all of those. Better education, more resources. Definitely green will getting a lot more attention from a law enforcement standpoint. Of course, resources like Narcan, which we had to have flown in, being able to possibly even have Narcan permanently stationed on the green so we could have a faster response. But I think that Mayor Harp hit on it best. New Haven is a place where we really are trying to help people. And many of the people who were treated yesterday are not even members of this community. They're from an outside community who come here for the treatment that their cities and their towns are not necessarily providing, and so they come here for treatment. And we've been giving them that treatment, and someone, you know, with malice in their heart took advantage of that, took advantage of this vulnerable population. But that will not stop this city from reaching its hand out to those who are in need and treating them and providing these services. Almost everyone here can acknowledge that drug addiction is a disease, and we will not turn our backs on those who are suffering. We will ramp up the ability to be able to make sure that people don't prey on them. But I believe that what you said, a combination of all those things, increased education, law enforcement, et cetera, is what we'll do.
So we're going to end this press conference now. If you have questions, you can ask people individually. Thank you all very much for coming.
All right, guys, so that was live in New Haven, Connecticut, of course, talking about the recent surge in the overdose problem. A lot of problems going on in Connecticut, just happens to be a surge at this moment. So there's an update for you from officials. Let's go back to that cabinet meeting. We still have it running. Again, this happened just a few moments ago. President Trump opening up this meeting, paying tribute to Aretha Franklin, and then pointing to his secretaries to speak right now. Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, is up.
And the relationship seems very good. I think it's probably hurt a little bit by China, because China isn't really happy with what I'm doing on trade, but we have no other choice as a country. And they understand that. So I think we're probably being hurt a little bit with respect to North Korea, having to do with China. But really, we have no choice on that. We had to do something. It was the money that was being drained out of our country and going to China. We rebuilt China. We rebuilt $500 billion a year for years and years and years. And we had to do something about that. They understand that. In fact, I think they're in a state of shock that they've been able to get away with it for so long, so many decades. So we just have to do something, and we did it. Could I ask Secretary Mnuchin, Turkey They have not proven to be a good friend. They have a great Christian pastor there. He's a very innocent man. I'd like to know, unrelated to the pastor, I just think it's a terrible thing that they're holding him. We got somebody out for him. He needed help getting somebody out of someplace. They came out. They want to hold our wonderful pastor. Not fair, not right. But unrelated to that, how are you doing with sanctions on Turkey? And as you know, we doubled up the tariffs on steel and aluminum. Aluminum will happen very shortly. How are you doing with sanctions, please?
Sir, we're doing well. As you know, we were very clear with our counterparts there, both Secretary Pompeo and myself, on the release of the pastor. We've put sanctions on several of their cabinet members. Working with you, we have more that we're planning to do if they don't release him quickly. I'd also just comment on the rollout of the Iran nuclear sanctions is going extremely well. We're working closely with Secretary Pompeo. Strongest sanctions in preventing things there, and continue to be very focused on implementing the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Just rolled out the pass-through regs, lowest rates we'll have for small business and pass-throughs since the 1930s, and a big part of what Larry Kudlow talked about in terms of the economic growth.
Great, good, thank you, great job, thank you very much. Secretary Wilkie, so we got choice pass for our vets, so our vets don't have to wait online for 6 weeks and end up with a simple condition that's terminal because they can't get to a doctor. I'm very proud of choice, and we're proud of a lot of the things we've done for the vets. But could you give us a little, how are you doing with choice? You've had it now for a couple of months. How is that moving along?
So it's moving along well, but I would start with something else. We are experiencing, with the economic boom, lowering rates of vets unemployment. Probably the best trends that we've seen in many, many years.
So vets unemployed, that's great.
That's right. And that is a boon for our warriors across the country. In terms of the Mission Act, Director Mulvaney and I will be talking about it tomorrow. We have the opportunity to do what has not been done in many years, and that is widen the aperture when it comes to the health choices available to veterans across the country. No longer in states like Montana, Secretary Zinke's from, where they have to travel 400 or 500 miles round trip. They can do this at home. We're making advances with Mission in the area of telehealth, which is a way to impact the mental health issues that many of our veterans face. So for the first time, we have a comprehensive and strategic way forward in making the lives of our veterans better, and it's a wonderful thing.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I hear you're doing great, and congratulations.
Thanks.
You got through, just got passed. So congratulations. You're going to be there for a long time, and you're going to do a fantastic job. It's the first time a secretary's really had a chance to do a fantastic job, because without choice, I think it would have been impossible. So we have choice now, and our vets are taken care of, and just make sure they go see the right doctor, right? When they need it. Sometimes they won't need it because you have plenty of great doctors at the VA. If I could ask Secretary Acosta a little bit about your association healthcare plan, which has been now completed, it's in service. How are you doing with it?
That's correct, Mr. President. Just in the past week, there were newspaper articles. A number of chambers of commerce around the country have reported that they've started these plans. They're in the process of offering it to their small businesses. You're seeing chambers in Nevada, in Texas. We're talking to some in Iowa, up in the Minnesota area as well. Associations here in Washington that represent businesses across the country are looking at them. Just today at the department is an association representing members of the gig economy that are looking to start these up. And so for a rule that is just weeks old, we're already seeing implementation, and we're seeing quite a bit of excitement. The U.S. Chamber had a call with the member chambers of commerce. And initially they weren't going to do the call because it's August and things are very quiet, but they decided to do the call anyhow. And they had a near record number of local chambers call in onto the call to learn how they can go about doing this. So there's quite a bit of energy and excitement.
That's fantastic. I appreciate that. And also, Secretary Costa, you're moving very nicely on your healthcare plans too. And one of the big things is the individual mandate is gone. We got rid of that. That was from Obamacare. That was by far the most unpopular thing in Obamacare. We actually got rid of Obamacare except for one vote, but we essentially have, so we're doing it piecemeal and it's going to be gone pretty soon. So fantastic job. I heard great things about the healthcare plan and a lot of people are signing up. A lot of associations are signing up far ahead of what we even projected.
That's
so
correct.
That's great.
Yes.
And maybe I could just, I'll finish off with Secretary Perdue. The farmers, we love the farmers. And you know, our farmers are brave and they're great patriots. And as you know, China sort of attacked our farmers by trying not to buy from our farmers. They know the farmers like Trump and I like them, I love them. And they are, I hear, despite everything, they're starting to really do well. They got out there like they are. They're incredible patriots, but they're incredible entrepreneurs. And they're selling the coin and the corn, and they're selling the soybean, and they're selling everything at levels that are soon going to be pretty good levels. And, you know, our farmers have been hurt for 15 and 20 years. They've been, a lot of bad things were happening. And I talk about soybeans where prior to my election, if you go 5 years back, soybean prices were cut by 50%. So this was happening long before us, and markets are closed. Canada charges us for dairy products 275%, tariffs of 275%, which makes it ridiculous and impossible. But we're taking care of that situation pretty easily. But I'd like to just ask, how are the farmers doing? I'm hearing it's starting to really pick up.
Farmers are resilient, Mr. President. They embody the American values and the spirit of entrepreneurship, risk-taking, hard work, and those American values. And we've talked about before, you call them patriots, and they are. Obviously, there are some price constraints right now, but they believe what you're doing in China, as you've tried to indicate to them, will lead to a better and brighter future when we get these trade relationships reestablished, and we believe that'll be soon. I applaud what Ambassador Lighthizer is doing, the conversations that we're having on various fronts, and we think you've got the attention and the leverage of the international community regarding the abuse that American farmers have taken in many places, both tariffs and non-tariff measures, in the EU and in China and many other places, and we think these will be rectified very soon.
Well, the word abuse is a good word because this country was abused by other countries, both friend and foe. You know, our allies, frankly, did better than many of our enemies when it came to trade. A terrible thing happened for many years, and we're changing that around. In fact, what I will do is I will speak to one more because I'd like to have Bob Lighthizer just give us a little update quickly on where we are with NAFTA and the various trade deals. I can say this, we're doing very well. I'm in no rush. We want to make the right deal. NAFTA has been a disaster for our country. Mexico and Canada were, if you think about making or if you think about deficits, we had a deficit of $135 billion a year on NAFTA. You look at New England, you look at different places where factories are still empty. They still haven't recovered. But now companies are moving back. So we're either going to do a good NAFTA, a fair NAFTA for us, or we're not doing NAFTA at all. Where are we, Bob?
Well, I would say, first of all, Mr. President, I would just underline what you say, and that is that we have an $800 billion trade deficit, something that's not sustainable over a long period of time. And I appreciate the opportunity to go out and negotiate these deals one at a time. In terms of NAFTA, right now we're meeting with the Mexicans literally as we sit here. And I'm hopeful that in the next several days we'll have a breakthrough. There are still some difficult issues to work on, as there always are at the end. I know you.
And by the way, Bob, if we don't, that's okay. If you don't have a breakthrough, as you call it, don't do the deal. Because it's a lousy situation for the United States. We have much better alternatives than that. You understand? Yes. So if you can't make the right deal, don't make it. All right? You know that. I only tell them that every day.
It is, yes, sir. I'll attest to the fact that he tells me that every day. He also tells me what the alternatives are. So, but I think in this particular case, the best alternative may be to get a good agreement. And I think there's a possibility of that. I'm hopeful with Mexico, and then I'm hopeful once we get one with Mexico that Canada will come along. So I feel reasonably good about that, but as you say, there are still some things that have to go through. We have made headway on a number of other areas. We've had, as I've told you, some 15 or 20 other smallish agreements that have been helpful for agriculture in other areas. I call them hitting singles. Every time you're at bat, it's not a home run. We're hitting single after single, and literally every few weeks we have one. And there are several I won't go through now, but there are several that are in play that'll make a real difference to specific people and sectors in agriculture, but in other areas. Korea, as you know, that agreement is finished, and I think it's a step in the right direction. And then we have Europe, where you started an initiative that Larry Kudlow and I are working on, and that is that's a major initiative, and it's something that we're in the process of putting together the kind of team we need to negotiate on tariffs, but on barriers, and hopefully open up a lot of new opportunities for American products to be sold in Europe.
And I think I can say that we're talking to China. They very much want to talk. They are just not able to give us a deal that's acceptable. So we're not going to do any deal until we get one that's fair to our country. EU, we're doing very well. They didn't want us to put tariffs on their cars, and they therefore decided that they were extremely happy with the deal they had. In fact, they told me, oh, we'd rather not negotiate. We're very, very happy with the deal we have. Well, they made $151 billion last year. They should be happy. But I said, but I'm not happy. And so we were ready to do tariffs on their cars, but they came. They saw us a week ago, as you know. Most of you were here. And I think we're doing well, Bob, with respect to the EU. We're negotiating something that hopefully will be fair to them and to us and to everybody. A big difference from what it is now. Right now, it's impossible. They have barriers where we can't get anything through. As far as Mexico and Canada, Mexico, Bob told you about, we're not negotiating with Canada right now. Their tariffs are too high. Their barriers are too strong. So we're not even talking to them right now. But we'll see how that works out. It'll only work out to our favor. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
We're finished. Let's go.
Ianni has been with SNAP for 11 years. She joined in 2007 after herself seeking help. Ianni was victimized when she was just 8 years old.
I went to Catholic school, and the nuns taught us that the priests were sent by God. So I thought God had sent this priest to abuse me, because I thought I must have done something wrong. At one point, I thought I had more original sin, that I was a dirty little girl, and for some reason, I had done something wrong, that I deserved this. And my perpetrator told me if I told anyone that I would go to hell.
And she says the church continued that victimization.
I had said, well, what I need is I need to be told it's not my fault. I need to be told that someone is sorry and that someone's going to do something about it. And I didn't get any of those things from that first priest. And it took 18 months where they passed me back and forth, and I felt like a liability. I didn't feel like a victim who was hurting.
Even though SNAP is the nation's oldest and largest support group for those who have been abused by religious and community leaders, Ianni says only 1 in 10 victims actually comes forward.
And you're thinking, what if I'm not believed? What if they think I'm dirty? What if they get angry at me? What if someone sues me? And there's such shame involved in it that it's so impossibly hard to come forward. That's why you don't see people come forward till their 40s, 50s, 60s. Maybe their perpetrator has died. Maybe, their mother died and she never knew. You just never know when someone's going to come forward, but it's not early.
But with the grand jury report and more allegations coming to light, Ianni hopes that stigma will soon be history.
My goal would be, so if a little kid falls down, and they scrape their knee, they go running to someone to get a Band-Aid to get it fixed. If a child is sexually abused, I want them to be able to do that same thing, to know they can go to someone's going to take care of it, and it'll be okay. And I think those are the things that we have to work on as a society.
For those looking for help, SNAP leaders, including Ianni, are available anytime. You can find more SNAP resources on fox5dc.com. Corey Coffin, Fox 5 Local News.
As red tide continues to choke the southwest Florida coast, dead fish are piling up on white sand beaches.
Since our contractor's been on island, he started August 1st, we've collected about 300 tons of fish from the beach.
On Sanibel Island, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission took this photo of a 26-foot-long whale shark that washed ashore. The microscopic algae are also having an impact on air quality.
I think it is affecting me a little bit. I can tell I have a little irritation in my throat, coughing.
On Sarasota's popular Lido Beach, the concession stand has been closed all week and the parking lot nearly empty. Tourist-dependent businesses are being affected, including these vacation rental condos.
A lot of cancellations, and I'm closing the office early most days just to get out of here myself because it's affecting me.
Governor Rick Scott's emergency declaration this week offers interest-free loans of up to $50,000 for small businesses that qualify. It also includes additional funding for researchers at Mote Marine Laboratory and Aquarium who are responding to increased reports of dead or distressed animals.
We average 100 turtles a year and about 10 to 15 dolphins a year. So, you know, we're seeing our annual averages in less than a month, sometimes less than a week. It's been pretty trying for our team.
At this dead-end canal in Boca Grande, Mote researchers are conducting the first field test of a new system designed to destroy red tide algae and toxins in smaller waterways.
We're studying red tide. We're trying to understand what causes it. I mean, we know it's natural. It's been around for thousands of years. But what can we do about it? That's the big question.
Scientists still can't say when the red tide will go away. Now in its 10th month, this is the longest bloom Southwest Florida has seen in more than a decade. In Sarasota, Florida, Jonathan Seri, Fox News.
After a hard breakup and a series of medical issues in a short period of time, 18-year-old Katie Stubblefield tried to take her own life by shooting herself in the face. 3 years later, she became the youngest person in the United States to receive a face transplant. Dr. Brian Gastman and his team of specialists at Cleveland Clinic transplanted her scalp, forehead, eyelids, and nose, as well as parts of her cheeks, jaw, muscles, and teeth. 3 years of procedures led up to the transplant at Cleveland Clinic. It was the first total face transplant for the hospital, which was the first hospital to perform any kind of face transplant in the United States. Stubblefield's face transplant happened in May of 2017. Since then, she's had additional surgeries to move her eyes forward and help improve her speech. Stubblefield faces several more surgeries and will remain on anti-rejection medications for the remainder of her life. She hopes to heal to the point where her nephew isn't afraid to look at her. In New York, Laura Engel, Fox News.
It's back to class at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas.
Just got to move on, and we just got to just do it. It's my last year, senior year, so I'm out after this.
The nearly 3,000 students walking back into a high school that will never be the same. 17 lives taken senselessly only 6 months ago. A tragedy that sparked a movement for change.
It's a bittersweet day here for everyone. I think everyone's glad to get back and be reunited.
Reunited after a summer dedicated to implementing tighter security in schools.
They said that they put a lot of new safety measures in. I mean, I'm about to find out right now, so I mean, we'll see just how it goes.
The Broward County School District rolling out these protocols. Each school will now have a single point of entry, which means one way in and one way out during arrival and dismissal. An armed officer or armed guardian on every campus. New fences and more security cameras have also been installed. Students and faculty ID badges must be worn at all times. And this year, there is more money available for mental health programs.
Everything from counselors, social workers, behavior therapists.
And when it comes to providing security, officials say once the district gets more funding, they can hit their goal of getting every campus a school resource officer.
If you ask me about what the county's done, I don't think they've done enough, but I do feel the school is safer, and I had just said is that I met all the new police last week and the new SROs, and I'm very impressed with the guys that we have, and they honestly and sincerely say that they want to protect our kids.
We received multiple calls on the green for persons experiencing overdose symptoms.
A man lying on the ground lifeless. Minutes later, he's fighting off first responders. He's showing the signs of a K2 overdose. This man, just one of more than a dozen people sickened by the synthetic drug in a Connecticut park Wednesday.
There were several. There were some that were unconscious, some were nauseous, lethargic, some in respiratory duress.
As many as 60 people overdosing, while others nearby watch in horror as first responders administer a life-saving drug.
Here on the green, Narcan did not do anything. In the hospitals where they received much higher doses over a period of time, there was clinical improvement.
And as the nation battles the opioid crisis, K2 overdoses are taking hold. In the nation's capital, over 260 people ODing on synthetic drugs during a 10-day period in July, with first responders across the country reporting a spike in cases.
It's a nationwide problem that people are self-medicating for several different reasons.
None of the overdoses in Connecticut were deadly, but with a new, stronger strain of K2 hitting the streets and a price tag of as little as $2 a packet, health officials warn it's only a matter of time. In New York, Jackie Ibanez, Fox News.
San Francisco Department of Public Works crews respond throughout the city, pressure washing streets after reports of human waste. The problem, says Tobacco Barn's Rashid Abood, is that by the time he calls in a complaint, it's already too late.
Because the block in front of my store, it doesn't look good. And sometimes you find, pooping and stuff like that.
Now the city is looking to get ahead of the problem, setting aside a 6-person crew which will scour targeted neighborhoods looking for human waste. First on the list, Polk Street. Department of Public Works Mohammed Nuru says the city will spend about $750,000 to search for and clean human and animal waste before anyone has a chance to see it and complain.
So what happens is we're going to take one of those crews out and try to get ahead of those calls and try and look for these locations so that hopefully we'll get less number of calls coming in.
San Francisco Mayor London Breed says the plan is part of her commitment to clean up the city's streets and says the key is using data-driven strategies to see what works and what doesn't.
We have data that shows us exactly where most of the complaints are for poop cleanup. So the goal is to try and make sure that we have a dedicated team and they're focusing on those particular areas where we know it's most problematic.
Abood says he's happy to hear that the Poop Patrol will be on duty soon, cleaning the area around his business.
Oh my God, that'd be excellent. Yeah, because we always call all the time, 311, and they come and tell you, oh, we just come and clean up. We can't force them to leave.
The city's Poop Patrol program is set to launch September 1st. If it is successful, they'll look to expand it in other parts of the city. In San Francisco, Christian Captain, KTVU, Fox 2 News.
Fried waffles, cheese, and corn dogs, all available on a stick. You name it, and the Iowa State Fair has it for the hundreds of thousands who attend every year. It's no secret the fair is a fried food lover's paradise, but with nearly 200 concession stands, this year's vendors are urging fairgoers to make room for dessert. Mike Beeger, a 15-year employee of Dipped in Chocolate, says sweet treats are becoming the new main course at the fair.
We had tried out doing chocolate chip cookie dough a few years ago, and it just blew up like crazy.
And now the chocolatier and his crew have come up with a bizarre showstopper he says can rival any fried dish.
The cookie dough pasta is probably the craziest thing I've seen.
That's right, cookie dough spaghetti noodles.
Squeeze it out.
Are topped with a strawberry dessert sauce, and instead of a classic meatball, a Ferrero Rocher chocolate is placed on top. Mike isn't alone. Other dessert stands are joining the wave of entree-themed goodies, like beef sundaes and ice cream nachos. With 56 new items this year alone, vendors try to beat the competition with the wow factor.
Every year we have a new foods contest, and our concessionaires get real fired up about that, and they'll try crazy and wacky things.
It's more than just a fair, it's a competition to see who has the best recipe, fried, dipped, or on a stick.
The food part of our fair is super important. We do research each year, and 70% of those who come to the fair are coming to try our food. So we have individual concessionaires. One, for example, last year for the first time broke $1 million.
While Iowa may not be the biggest fair, Texas and Minnesota have it beat. It certainly sets the tone for bizarre food and competition. In Des Moines, Iowa, Talia Kirkland, Fox News.
That stuff looks amazing. So hopefully if you are out and about and can catch some of the Iowa State Fair, one of the biggest in the nation, that's there for you. We will close out the stream today, guys, with a final tribute to the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, passing away today at the age of 76. And we'll catch you tomorrow.
With those 7 letters, Aretha Franklin made her mark in music history and helped define her reign as the Queen of Soul for decades. Aretha Franklin was born on March 25, 1942 in Memphis, Tennessee, to a Baptist preacher father and a gospel singer mother. Franklin was one of 5 children, and following her parents' separation, she moved to Detroit, Michigan. Regarded as a child prodigy, Franklin toured with her father's traveling revival show. It was there she honed her musical skills. She was only 18 when she signed her first record deal with Columbia Records, releasing her first album, The Great Aretha Franklin. She hit the top 10 of the R&B charts, but needed a move to a new label in 1967 to cross over and break through to the pop charts. The release of the album, I Never Loved a Man the Way I Loved You, debuted one of her most popular songs ever, earning her respect worldwide.
Respect was on the charts, and it was very close to the top of the charts. And we kind of knew something was happening.
An anthem for women everywhere, the song catapulted her onto the big stage, winning 2 Grammys. With her fame rising, Franklin became only the second African-American woman to appear on the cover of Time magazine, and she was invited to sing at the funeral of Martin Luther King Jr.
And the wind
Her popularity continued to rise in the 70s, winning Grammy after Grammy, transcending platforms, and winning the admiration of fans and performers alike.
I heard Aretha's voice. It's just something that she has, and the way she makes people feel, you know, was what I wanted to have.
A role in the 1980 blockbuster movie, The Blues Brothers, allowed her to shine on the big screen, introducing her to yet another audience.
You better think about what you're saying. You better think about the consequences of your actions.
And she topped the charts again with a #1 hit, a duet with George Michael, I Knew You Were Waiting for Me. In 1987, Franklin broke yet another barrier, becoming the first woman inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And she stood before the nation performing at President Clinton's 1993 inauguration and became the youngest recipient ever of the Kennedy Center Honors 1 year later. The accolades didn't stop there. In 2005, President George Bush honored her with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest award bestowed on a civilian.
Generations of Americans have stood in wonder at the style and voice of Aretha Franklin. One record executive put it this way: Aretha is still the best singer in the world, bar none.
In January 2009, Franklin performed My Country 'Tis of Thee at the inauguration of America's first black president, Barack Obama. A few years later, she hit the stage in Washington yet again in a surprise performance to honor Carole King singing A Natural Woman at the 38th Annual Kennedy Center Honors in 2015. 2 years later, Aretha Franklin called it quits, announcing she was retiring from touring. Over 5 decades, the legendary singer scored 17 top 10 hits. She won 18 Grammys, plus 2 additional honorary Grammy Awards. But more than just awards and honors, she gave fans everywhere the soundtrack to their lives and used her voice to spread a message of respect, something she said is a basic human right. In New York, Laura Ingalls, Fox News.